4 years, AZN was the fearless heartbeat of street outlaws. No prep kings, a relentless racer known for loyalty, humor, and unbreakable determination. On screen, he embodied speed, brotherhood, and survival in one of motorsport's most dangerous arenas. Then, in a single violent moment that carefully built image shattered, a catastrophic racing accident left him fighting not for trophies, but for movement, identity, and purpose itself. What followed became a brutal reckoning that redefined legacy, resilience, and the fragile cost of living fast. Before the cameras, before the crowds, and long before national fame, AZN's life was shaped by discipline, loyalty, and a relentless drive to belong to something larger than himself. His journey began in the unforgiving world of street racing, where reputations were not handed out. They were earned through risk, endurance, and consistency. Every late-night build, every dangerous test run, and every underground race became a quiet lesson in survival. In those early years, speed was not about glory. It was about proving worth. Within that fiercely competitive underground culture, AZN quickly distinguished himself. Not through arrogance, not through spectacle, but through dependability. He showed up when others hesitated. He stood firm when pressure mounted. In a world where trust was scarce, AZN became reliable, a presence teammates could lean on when stakes were highest. That reputation carried him forward, carving a path toward a place inside one of street racing's most legendary crews. When he joined the 405 team, the shift was immediate. This was not merely a racing group. It was a brotherhood forged through shared danger. The team operated as a single unit, where loyalty mattered as much as raw horsepower. Every race demanded absolute trust. Every mechanical decision carried consequences that could reshape lives. And within that environment, AZN thrived. His natural humor softened the tension. His fierce competitiveness sharpened the team's edge. Together, those qualities made him not just an asset, but a stabilizing force. As street outlaws rose to prominence, AZN's image grew alongside it. On screen, he embodied grit and determination, balancing light-hearted banter with focused intensity. Viewers connected not just to his racing skill, but to his emotional transparency. He carried the underdog spirit, the feeling of someone who had fought upward rather than starting ahead. Each win felt earned. Each setback felt deeply personal. That authenticity became his signature. Yet behind the success, the reality of the lifestyle remained brutally unforgiving. High-speed racing allows no margin for hesitation. Every decision, every throttle push, every mechanical gamble existed on a knife's edge. The risks were not theoretical. They were constant, ever-present, and waiting. Crashes were not anomalies. They were inevitabilities postponed by skill, preparation, and luck. But AZN never raced timidly. Fear, to him, was fuel. Pressure became momentum. In the chaos of competition, he found clarity. The roar of engines and the blur of asphalt created a space where doubt dissolved. In that world, identity became simple. Survive, perform, win. Success followed swiftly. Championships, sponsorships, and growing fan devotion transformed AZN into a recognized figure far beyond street racing circles. But success also carried weight. Each victory added expectation. Each appearance reinforced the image of resilience and invincibility. And beneath the celebrations, a subtle shift occurred. Racing was no longer solely about personal achievement. It became about representing a team, honoring a community, and meeting the emotional investment of countless viewers. That responsibility forged strength, but it also carved vulnerability. The pressure to perform intensified. The fear of failure deepened. Each race amplified the fragile balance between glory and disaster. In quiet moments, that awareness lingered, a reminder that speed had consequences, and consequences rarely announced themselves in advance. Still, AZN continued forward. The engine noise drowned hesitation. The track silenced uncertainty. Momentum became identity. Risk became routine. And within that rhythm, invincibility slowly settled into belief. But belief can be dangerous. Because in a sport where fractions of a second determine fate, the line between triumph and catastrophe remains impossibly thin. And that fragile balance was nearing its breaking point. Then came the race that transformed triumph into irreversible tragedy. The race unfolded like countless others before it. Engines screamed. Tires clawed at the asphalt. The crowd leaned forward, breath held, as two machines hurled themselves down the strip at unforgiving speed. For AZN, this was familiar territory, the controlled chaos where instinct, training, and courage fused into a singular focus. Every sense locked in, every muscle tuned. Victory always existed only inches ahead. Then, in a fraction of a second, everything fractured. The car destabilized. The rear end snapped loose. Traction vanished. What followed was a violent chain reaction. Metal twisting, glass exploding, and force slamming into the vehicle with merciless precision. The impact reverberated across the track, silencing the crowd and freezing teammates in disbelief. What had begun as competition ended as catastrophe. Emergency crews rushed forward as smoke and debris filled the air. Inside the wreckage, AZN lay motionless. The man once defined by speed was suddenly suspended in terrifying stillness. Each second stretched unbearably. Every breath became uncertain. In those moments, survival was no longer guaranteed. It had to be fought for. Paramedics worked with ruthless urgency, stabilizing his injuries before transport. Sirens pierced the night, escorting him away from the only world he had truly known. The track, once a place of purpose and identity, faded behind flashing lights and rising dread. In the hospital, reality descended with devastating clarity. Severe injuries, spinal trauma, partial paralysis, words spoken carefully, yet carrying irreversible weight. Doctors outlined uncertain outcomes and painful possibilities. Recovery, if it came, would be long. Movement, once automatic, would become an exhausting battle. Independence, once unquestioned, now hung precariously in doubt. For a man whose life revolved around motion, stillness became torment. Hospital rooms replaced race trailers. Monitors replaced engine noise. Silence replaced adrenaline. The psychological toll began to eclipse even the physical pain. Each waking moment forced confrontation with vulnerability. The body that once defied physics now resisted basic commands. Simple tasks, lifting an arm, shifting position, sitting upright, demanded exhausting concentration. And beneath the physical struggle, a deeper terror emerged. The loss of identity. AZN had built his entire sense of self around speed, precision, and fearlessness. Racing was not merely a career. It was his language, his community, his proof of belonging. Stripped of that, uncertainty flooded in. Who was he without the track? Who remained when speed was no longer possible? Support poured in from fans, teammates, and family, yet isolation lingered. Fame could not shield him from despair. Public encouragement offered warmth, but nights remained cold. In the quiet hours, doubt whispered relentlessly. The mind replayed the crash in fragments. Metal, impact, helplessness. Each memory reopening psychological wounds. Rehabilitation began with brutal honesty. Progress would be slow. Pain would be constant. Frustration would test endurance. Muscles long conditioned for explosive power now required retraining for simple function. Each inch of regained movement felt monumental. Each failure felt devastating. Yet within that struggle, something unexpected stirred. Refusal. Refusal to surrender. Refusal to accept a narrative of permanent defeat. Even in the depths of injury, the same relentless drive that once powered his races now redirected itself toward survival. Every therapy session became a contest against limitation. Every ache became evidence of effort. Still, optimism remained fragile. Doctors could not promise full recovery. No timeline existed. The future blurred into uncertainty. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Would he walk again? Would he race again? Would he ever reclaim independence? The reality, however, offered no comfort. Survival now demanded reinvention. The past could not be restored. The body had changed. and the mind had to follow. Behind closed doors, fear deepened. Not fear of pain, but fear of irrelevance, of becoming invisible, of losing purpose. The crash had stolen more than physical ability. It had dismantled certainty. Yet even in despair, endurance persisted. The same discipline that once tuned engines now disciplined thought. Each day began with effort. Each night ended in exhaustion. Progress, however microscopic, became fuel. But the psychological reckoning was only beginning, because surviving the crash was not the hardest battle. The hardest battle was learning how to live after it. Recovery did not unfold as a heroic montage of steady improvement. It arrived slowly, unevenly, and without mercy. Progress came in fragments, often followed by painful regression. Each small victory was shadowed by fresh limitations, forcing AZN to confront a brutal truth. Healing would not restore his former life. It would only reshape it. The physical pain was relentless, but the psychological weight proved far heavier. The body could be trained. The mind resisted. In the quiet hours, doubt crept in, dissolving confidence piece by piece. Once, his identity had been simple: racer, competitor, fighter. Now, those words felt distant, almost fictional. Stripped of speed and independence, he faced an unfamiliar question. Who remained when the engine noise faded? The public still saw strength. The cameras still captured determination. Support flooded social media, carrying messages of hope and admiration. Yet behind that visible encouragement existed an invisible loneliness. Rehabilitation isolated him from the world that once defined him. The team moved forward. Races continued. Life, relentless and indifferent, did not pause. That realization cut deeper than any physical wound. Moments of frustration escalated into internal warfare. Simple movements demanded exhausting concentration. Tasks once automatic now required deliberate planning. Each failure felt personal. Each delay reinforced the fear that permanence had replaced possibility. The body resisted memory. Muscles forgot instinct. Nerves responded unpredictably. Progress, when it appeared, did so painfully slowly. Psychological strain intensified. Anxiety lingered. Depression hovered. Nights became battlegrounds of reflection and regret. The crash replayed endlessly, each fragment echoing louder than the last. Questions haunted his thoughts. If a fraction of a second had changed everything, what control had ever truly existed? And yet, buried within despair, another transformation began. Acceptance did not arrive gently. It arrived through exhaustion, through repeated confrontation with limitation, through moments when resistance gave way to understanding. The body had changed. The future had altered. But survival itself remained an achievement, one not defined by speed, but by endurance. Gradually, perception shifted. The struggle itself became purpose. Therapy sessions transformed into daily rituals of defiance. Each attempt, no matter how small, carried symbolic weight. Moving a finger, sitting upright, standing with assistance. These milestones rewrote the definition of victory. Still, grief lingered. Mourning the loss of former identity proved unavoidable. The man who once chased adrenaline now wrestled with patience. The racer who lived for motion learned stillness. And in that stillness, introspection deepened. Conversations with teammates evolved. No longer centered solely on competition, they began exploring meaning, survival, and gratitude. The brotherhood that once thrived on horsepower now strengthened through empathy. Their support anchored him, reminding him that value extended beyond performance. Public perception began shifting as well. Fans no longer saw only speed. They witnessed vulnerability. And within that vulnerability, resilience resonated more powerfully than any victory ever had. AZN became more than a racer. He became a symbol of perseverance. Yet internal acceptance remained fragile. The desire to reclaim the past clashed constantly with the reality of irreversible change. Each day balanced hope and grief. Each step forward reminded him of miles lost. Still, persistence endured. Through discipline, reflection, and relentless effort, A new sense of identity slowly emerged, one grounded not in dominance, but in resilience. Not in spectacle, but in survival. The crash had dismantled his former life, but it also forced reinvention. Pain forged perspective, loss cultivated depth, and vulnerability unveiled strength previously unseen. The journey forward was uncertain, but direction slowly returned. Because within devastation, a new purpose was quietly forming. Out of devastation, an unexpected path toward redemption began to unfold. Rehabilitation transformed from obligation into mission. What once felt like punishment gradually evolved into purpose. Every session became a battlefield against limitation, and every ounce of regained movement stood as a declaration of defiance. The process was slow, agonizing, and unpredictable, yet AZN approached it with the same discipline that once fueled his racing career. The drive that had pushed engines to their limits now pushed muscles and nerves beyond perceived boundaries. Each morning began with pain. Each evening ended in exhaustion. But between those moments, resolve strengthened. Physical therapy reshaped not only his body but his identity. Progress arrived in fragile increments. A steadier step, stronger balance, improved coordination. Small gains that carried immense emotional weight. What once required no thought now demanded fierce concentration. Yet with each victory, belief quietly returned. Public appearances followed. When AZN re-emerged, he no longer embodied invincibility. He embodied resilience. Fans saw vulnerability etched across determination, a man reshaped by suffering yet unbroken by it. His story resonated far beyond racing. Survivors of trauma, injury, and illness found themselves reflected in his perseverance. The racer had become something more enduring, a symbol of human endurance. Conversations changed. The dialogue surrounding AZN shifted from speed to strength, from dominance to survival. His presence no longer celebrated only competition but compassion. The tragedy that once defined his loss now defined his influence. Messages poured in from individuals who had faced paralysis, life-altering injuries, and devastating setbacks. In those stories, AZN recognized shared pain and collective hope. This connection reshaped his understanding of legacy. Success was no longer measured by trophies or victories. It became measured by impact, by how deeply perseverance could inspire, by how vulnerability could unify. The track had once been his world, but now a larger stage emerged. One grounded in empathy and survival. Friendships deepened. Loyalty intensified. Those who had once celebrated wins now celebrated milestones of recovery. Each step, each therapy breakthrough became a communal victory. And within that shared triumph, gratitude flourished. The fragility of life no longer felt abstract. Felt intimate. Yet healing remained uneven. Progress was often followed by setbacks. Pain returned without warning. Fatigue lingered. Doubt occasionally resurfaced. The future, though hopeful, remained uncertain. Doctors could not guarantee full recovery. Long-term limitations persisted. Acceptance demanded ongoing negotiation between hope and realism. Still, resolve prevailed. The man who once chased speed now chased endurance. The racer who lived for adrenaline learned patience. And in that transformation, emotional clarity emerged. The tragedy that once stripped meaning now infused it. AZN's reinvention was not dramatic. It was deliberate, quiet, earned through repetition and resilience. His story began shifting from spectacle to substance, from victory to survival. And within that shift, a new chapter of influence unfolded, one built not on power, but on perseverance. Yet even as purpose redefined itself, shadows lingered. Because some wounds do not fade easily, and some battles never fully conclude. Even redemption carried shadows that refused to fully fade. Time did not erase the impact of the crash. It refined it. What once felt like devastation slowly transformed into perspective, reshaping not only AZN's future but the meaning of his past. The life he once knew, the speed, the noise, the relentless pursuit of victory, no longer defined him. Instead, survival itself became the foundation of a new legacy. In the stillness that followed recovery, reflection deepened. Every moment carried a heightened awareness of fragility. The illusion of control that once surrounded racing dissolved, replaced by a sober understanding of consequence. Ambition, once driven by dominance, evolved into intention. Success became less about arrival and more about endurance. Each day survived became a victory. Each obstacle overcome became a testament. The street Outlaws community changed alongside him. Conversations shifted. Safety gained new urgency. Risk, once glorified, began to be examined with greater responsibility. His accident forced a collective reckoning, a recognition that entertainment built on danger carried irreversible cost. AZN's survival became a reminder that behind every race stood families, friendships, and futures hanging in delicate balance. Yet his influence extended beyond motorsports. Survivors of trauma, paralysis, and life-altering injury found hope in his journey. His resilience offered proof that purpose does not disappear with ability. It transforms. Through interviews, public appearances, and quiet mentorship, he became a voice for perseverance, vulnerability, and emotional honesty. His story bridged isolation, reminding others that suffering, though deeply personal, was never solitary. The legacy emerging from tragedy was not triumphant. It was profound. Gone was the myth of invincibility. In its place stood authenticity, the courage to confront pain publicly, the humility to accept limitation, the strength to rebuild identity from shattered certainty. His journey illuminated a universal truth, that survival, when paired with purpose, becomes transformation. Within that transformation, AZN discovered a new measure of fulfillment. The roar of engines was replaced by quieter triumphs. Walking further, standing longer, smiling easier. Progress, once measured in seconds, now unfolded in patience. And with each small step forward, gratitude deepened. The narrative of his life expanded beyond speed. It embraced endurance, empathy, and reflection. The crash had taken away one future, but it revealed another, one rich in meaning and connection. In adversity, depth emerged. In loss, clarity formed. And in vulnerability, resilience thrived. Yet the shadows remained. Pain lingered. Limitations persisted. Certain doors would never reopen. Acceptance required constant renewal. There were days when grief resurfaced, when longing for the past returned with unsettling force. Healing, it became clear, was not a destination. It was a process, uneven, ongoing, and demanding. Still, he endured. Not because endurance was easy, but because surrender was impossible. His legacy became a testament to human adaptability, to the quiet power of persistence, to the idea that tragedy, though merciless, does not dictate final meaning. Instead, meaning is forged in response, in how one chooses to rise, rebuild, and redefine. In the end, AZN's story is not about racing. It is about survival. It is about transformation. It is about the fragile line between ambition and consequence, and the extraordinary resilience required to walk back from its edge. Because some legacies are not built in victory. They are forged in survival.